Hey, sports fans, it's Larry Eder here with RunBlogRun, socialing the distance, and we have a treat for you today. We have Robert Griffin III. Isn't that cool? Hey, good to see you.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, brother.
Robert is, well, I just got to say all the stuff because it's fun. 2011 Heisman Trophy winner. He played at Baylor, fine institution, Washington Redskins, then Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens. This is the thing I really like. You're the first guy in pro sports and MLB, NFL, NBA to have Roman numerals on your singlet. I just think that's cool. Robert Griffin, congratulations. It's great to see you.
No, I appreciate you having me on. And, you know, that Roman numeral meant a lot to me when I got to college, wanted to honor my family, my heritage. And when I got to the NFL, they changed the rule immediately. Didn't even have to ask them. They wanted me to put that Roman numeral on the back of my jersey. Honestly, it was probably just for jersey sales, but for my family, it meant a lot.
You were born in Okinawa, and your mom and dad were both Army sergeants, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah, my dad was a tank driver in the Army, so kind of follow that stuff up. Now, in high school, you played basketball, football, and track and field. So
Right.
you were a three-sport guy. I think that's very, very cool. Did you really like basketball?
Oh, my goodness. I love basketball. Basketball is my first love. And I encourage all the kids out there and parents that are listening to this, make sure you allow your children not to specialize too early. Let them play as many sports as possible. They'll become a more well-rounded athlete. For me, basketball was my baby. It wasn't the first sport that I played. The first sport I ever played was baseball.
Wow.
So although I was a three-sport athlete in high school, I started off with baseball, and then I gravitated towards basketball. You know, honestly, I thought I was going to be the next Michael Jordan, right? Who didn't? I was
cool.
I was born in 1990, so I was a like Mike kid. 1996, I was like 6 years old, and he was doing his thing. So basketball is really what I gravitated towards. I ended up playing varsity basketball. I ran varsity track, and the sport that I ended up going professional in, I didn't even start on varsity until I was a junior. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, let your kids play as many sports as possible. I was, good at basketball and track and could have went pro in either of those sports. But the one ultimately that, got me hooked was football.
How did you get involved in track and field?
Well, this might be a little shocking. So at the end of my story in track and field, I was a 400 hurdler, right?
Yeah.
I 400, I did the sprints, but I started my track and field career as a distance runner. So
wow.
I was trying to break the mile record at field day in 5th and 6th grade. For anybody that remembers field day. So I was that record, and my dad, I went to him and said, hey, I really want to run this mile in, less than 5 minutes, do this whole deal. So he trained me at that. After I got a feel for that, I ended up breaking the record at field day, in case anyone was wondering. And then that summer, I started with track and field at the age of 11. There was a flyer going around school. Hey, if you want to sign up for summer AAU track, bring this to your parents. I brought it to my parents, and that was my introduction into track and field. I actually started from distance. Then I went to the 100.
Wow.
And I transitioned to the hurdles in that first year. So it was a wild, wild experience running track and field for that first year.
And when you were in high school, you did the 110 hurdles and the 300-meter hurdles, correct?
Correct.
You were also the Gatorade Athlete of the Year, your junior year, man. That's a big deal. I mean, it's Gatorade was the guys who helped sponsor my first magazine, American Track and Field, and they've done really good stuff. So that's and I think that's one of the coolest awards. The way they do it is really fun. So
yeah, Gatorade does a great job with that. I'll even go even further. In high school, I ran the hurdles, the 110s and 3. I was also a high jumper and a long jumper. So I high jumped 6'8", a long jump 24 feet. So I can't stress enough to the parents out there, let your kids explore all types of things because it'll make them a better athlete. You don't know how many players in the NFL, ran the hurdles or did the high jump or the long jump or played baseball or played soccer. You never know what that sport is going to be that ultimately becomes your calling. But as long as you're out there exploring those different possibilities, then the possibilities are endless.
Did you ever do a decathlon?
I was not a decathlete, but I was a pentathlete. So
cool.
I did the multis.
That's awesome.
I had a lot of fun with the Maltese. The reason I didn't become a decathlete was once they threw in the pole vault, it took a lot more training to learn how to do pole vault, and I was pretty good at the sprints. It didn't make sense to continue down that path.
Sure, sure. What was the toughest part of being a pro football player?
Oh man, the toughest part of being a pro football player is probably the business aspect of it. I came in the league. We won our division our first year, rookie of the year. I got hurt, and after getting hurt, there's just a lot of turmoil, and it makes you see the business side of the NFL as opposed to just, hey, come play, have fun, like high school or in college where you're growing into becoming a man. In the NFL, it is more of a business, and they make business decisions, and those decisions are tied to money. So I think that might have been the hardest part. And I think a lot of players struggle with that, not losing your love for the game because of some of the business stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I dealt with that struggle, eventually got over that, and was able to extend my career to be an 8-year career in the NFL. So for me, that was probably the toughest part of analyzing the business side versus continuing to have fun, a game that you played your entire life, just having that youthful energy.
What was different in competing in high school and college? What's the difference? If you're talking to a room full of kids right now who are really enjoying their high school experience, what would you tell them about high school and college sports?
What I would say is in high school, you grow up with these guys, typically. I'm a military kid, as you mentioned before. Both parents are military sergeants, so I moved around a bunch. But I was able to go from first grade through 12th grade in the same city. So in Coppers Cove, Texas, guys I was going to first grade with, I'm throwing them touchdown passes on Friday nights under the lights, right? Friday night lights is what we call it.
Yeah.
That experience you will never get again. So I always tell the high school kids, enjoy that because you're never going to be closer to those types of people that you spent 10, 12 years growing up with. You guys were crushing on the same girl in 5th grade, and now you guys are celebrating in the end zone throwing touchdowns. When you get to college, you start over. You go from being the best athlete at your school in high school to now being the bottom athlete because you're competing against 22 and 23-year-olds. So when you get to college, the difference is now you're growing into becoming a man. You're growing into understanding your responsibilities, being by yourself, not being with your parents, not having that, overbearing, over-the-shoulder guidance. So I think that's the biggest difference. In college, it is more on you to get it done than it is in high school, where you have all these checks and balances with school and classes and your parents. You go to college, there's still school, there's still classes, there's coaches, but now you are the manager of that time. And you got to learn how to manage your time and be responsible, have that discipline that you showed in high school to get to where you got.
Now, what about when you went from college to pro? What was the big difference there?
Yeah, I mentioned that difference from high school to college. Well, now the difference between college and pro is money, right? There's this saying out there that money doesn't show you who you are. It just it exemplifies or magnifies your faults. And I think that's what can happen when guys go from college to the NFL. Now, being disciplined's a little harder because you got a couple zeros in the bank. Going to those workouts are a little bit harder because you have the money to spend and you're not quite working for that money anymore. I wasn't a guy that went through that process. Thankfully, my parents, being military, taught me discipline, saw what you think, all those things. But that's the difference between going from high school to college and then college to the pros. Now you have that responsibility of no classes. Your sport is your class. The responsibility of having money, and you decide what you're going to do and whether you're going to be lazy or work hard. And I think as long as you know that from the jump, you're able to, accommodate and make the right decisions for your life.
Well, I don't think you slept in college because I saw you have a 3.67 GPA, poli-sci degree at Baylor, which is a tough program. And then you got your master's in communications.
Yes.
Talk to me about your master's degree. Why did you decide to get a master's degree?
First of all, I have to say this every time someone asks me about school. I graduated early from high school, a semester early, and I graduated from college in 2.5 years.
Wow.
Why I did that is because I didn't like school. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't smart or couldn't get good grades. Sure. I just didn't feel like retaking classes. Okay. If you don't like school and you're listening to this, you don't like school, and you don't like learning or whatever it may be, retaking the classes is not the way to go. Just get it done. Get the education done. And for me, graduating early was because I knew I was going to have to be on campus in the summer anyway. So instead of taking one class, I would take 3 or 4 classes in the summer each semester, and that accelerated my graduation process. So going to grad school for communications was actually my minor in normal school. My major was political science. I got the minor because I just needed to take one class to get the minor of some of the prerequisites, so I took it. And going to grad school for poli-sci, anyone who knows anything about education, doesn't really help you that much. That poli-sci degree is for you to go to law school. So I decided to get the master's in communications because I could actually use that down the line in the future without having to take more school to get a job. And it's funny because now I'm in communications, right? I work for ESPN, and I'm actually using that master's program to my benefit in this new industry.
So I want to talk to you about commentating and kind of where you see sports going. That's where I really wanted to pick your brain. What do you like about commentating for ESPN?
Man, honestly, it's the people that I get to work with. When you're a player and you hear people talking about you, it's very easy to get guarded and be upset when they make it personal or they criticize you in a way that you feel is unfair. So getting into this industry, I wanted to make sure I didn't do that. I wanted to make sure that I tell guys' stories the right way, that I present it the right way to the fan, and we have a good time, because that's what it's really about. So at ESPN, working with the people that I've had a chance to, the producer that I'm with in college football, his name is Kim Belton, been in the industry 40 years. He's phenomenal. My play-by-play guy is Mark Jones, been in the industry 40 years, unbelievable. Quint Kesenick does lacrosse coverage, and he's our sideline reporter, unbelievable. They make it fun for me to be a part of ESPN and the people behind the scenes that make everything come to fruition in front of the camera. The next thing I like about it is if you love a sport, like I love football, basketball, track and field, you can bring that energy to the sport that you feel like it needs. You can bring attention to the things in the sport that you feel needs attention to help improve it, or things that the sport is doing really well. I thoroughly enjoyed that process. I want people to have a good time when they hear me calling a game or calling a track meet. And I don't think that we've always gotten that from this industry, because there's a natural inclination to become critical of everything, but not provide solutions. I'm not that guy. I'm a solution guy. I like to solve problems. I like to point out the things that are going well. And if I point out something that's not going well, I'm going to give you why and how to fix it. And I feel like that's what this industry should be about, and I'm trying to be that.
Well, your fans in track and field, last year at the NCs, I put a little tweet up about you, and I got 122,000 retweets. And this time during the broadcast, you did the thing about track and field being the sport. 2 days in a row, 58,000 retweets one day, the next one 65,000. I'm going, I got to get you on the broadcast. I got to talk. So here's the question. I'm going to make you the guy in charge of track and field. So you're going to be the Sebco for a week, okay? And you've decided that you are going to revolutionize how it's being shown on TV. What are the 3 things you would do to change track and field coverage?
Ooh, track and field coverage on its own and track and field as a whole, I think, is 2 different conversations. But the track and field coverage for me, it's the style that I bring. I would encourage that style from other analysts. Don't be afraid to go out on a limb and know what the nickname for that athlete is, and you can utilize that nickname. It helps tell the story for that athlete.
Yeah.
The race of the 100 is like the crown jewel of track and field, right? Who's the fastest and who's the fastest woman in the world? I would always put that race last. Always last in the broadcast. Make everyone wait to watch that and tell the story of each sprinter in the race throughout the broadcast. That's going to make the fan get to know that athlete more and have more buy-in. Right now, track and field is so closely tied to times that the athletes don't quite get the recognition that they deserve, right? If I get Shelly Ann Frazier, Sha'Carri Richardson, Sharika Jackson, Marie-Jo Toulouse that just ran today, ran a world lead 10.75. If I get all them in a race and they don't run 10.70 or they don't run 10.9, sometimes in the track community, we look at that and we say, oh, that was a bad race. But it wasn't a bad race. It was the fact that they raced each other that we need to lean more into. And I promise you, if you get the best facing the best and you're telling their stories the right way, the fan will no longer care about the time. They'll care about the athlete. And I think that's where it comes from. And they'll run fast times, don't get me wrong. But that's how I would change, make slight tweaks to the broadcast, focus on the athlete's story, less on the time, focus on putting that 100 at the end of the track meet, allow the broadcasters to be themselves, speak to their own experiences, praise these athletes. And the number one thing that I think right now in track broadcasts happens is we expect someone to win, right, in any individual race. So if Sydney McLaughlin's running the Open 4, but you've got Paulino also in that race, and Sydney doesn't win, a lot of times the broadcast shifts to a focus on why Sydney didn't win.
Yeah.
As opposed to why did Paulino win and what did she do throughout the race to get that victory? And during NCAAs, there was a massive upset in the 400 hurdles when everyone thought Brittany Wilson was going to win. But Savannah Sutherland from Michigan ended up winning that race. And I made it a point to talk about Savannah Sutherland from Michigan and not talk about Britton Wilson for the entire duration of the breakdown of the race. I think that's important because Sutherland's story is important to tell just as much as Britton Wilson's is. And it's our job as broadcasters to capture that in the moment so that we don't become negative and we don't harp on failure, but we can prop up success. That would be my opinion.
I love that. Now I want to grab you about, being the head of World Athletics, things you do to change the sport, because I knew you were about ready to say something, and I wanted to get your thoughts there. Yeah,
I think for the sport of track and field as a whole, there's this, we want to compare ourselves to the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, the Premier Soccer League, but all of those leagues are team sports.
Right.
So if it's track and field and I'm the president of World Athletics, I'm not looking at those sports to figure out what to do. I'm looking at golf. I'm looking at tennis. How did they create this ecosystem that is sustainable and that sponsors actually want to get involved in? Now, I enjoy all sports. I know there's a lot of people out there that think golf is very boring, right? But golf is on TV when it's in season every single week. They have TV deals. You know who the players are. And that as the competition has kind of done this a little bit in golf, because there's no dominant player like Tiger Woods was or Phil Mickelson when he was on top, you still have these stories being told about all these great players, and it draws the audience in. So how does track and field produce that? I don't think that you get away from the World Championships or the Olympics. Those things are great. I think they do a really nice job at World Athletics with the World Champs and the Olympics. The Diamond League, I don't really see a big problem with the Diamond League, but I would try to set up track and field in a way that it has a Grand Slam type of system. Okay? These massive Grand Slams, I would do 5 Grand Slams a year and make it semis and finals in every single event. A lot of people are suggesting that you cut out the field events or you cut out some of the running events. I wouldn't do that. I'll give you the blueprint that I believe, that I've studied and looked at.
I love it.
For countless hours. Honestly, yesterday, I was talking with my wife and we were researching everything for like 10 hours trying to figure this out. How can we get this done for track and field? So what I would do is I'd do 5 Grand Slams. I'd go to the UK, France, the US, I'd go to, Saudi Arabia, go to the Middle East, and then have another one of these Grand Slams in Asia, either China or Japan. I know some people might even say Australia, but I'd have 5 of them. And I would run every single event and only allow 16 athletes in at each event. Why would I do that? That's going to ensure that the best are facing the best. There will be qualifying throughout the year up to those events. And if you're the top 16, boom, you're in. Only exceptions would come for world champions, Olympic champions, or Diamond League champions, right? Because the premise in track and field of the best facing the best never really happens. It only happens at world championships and the Olympics. And even at those, there's so many Americans and Jamaicans that are so good in the sprints, they don't even get a chance to run. So what I would do is I'd get that, because that's going to make TV sponsors want to invest in the sport. Right now, there's so many track meets going on all around the world at the same time. They don't know which track meets to invest in. And how can I, if I'm putting on a one-day event, get the sponsors to buy into that? So I would make each Grand Slam 4 days, right? I'd run the 100 and the 100 hurdles, and what else would it be? I'd do the high jump or the long jump. I put all of those events near the end of the competition, so they run back-to-back days. Those events, you don't need as much recovery for. But over the course of those 4 days, I would space it out to where the distance events like the 800, the 400 hurdles, the 1500, they get the most rest. But they're going to run twice, and we're going to see who the best 16 are, down to 8, we're going to have finals. What it does is it allows track and field to be able to tell the story the right way. Right now in track and field, we have 1 day to do 10 races maybe. It's a one-off race, and there's not enough lanes to determine who the best athletes in the world are. Everything is spread so thin that the money gets dwindled down. But if we can shrink that pool by creating a qualifying standard of 16 athletes get in, and it's 5 Grand Slams per year, it might not be the same 16 athletes at every Grand Slam, depending on how the year goes. But you for sure are going to make sure you have the best facing the best. And that's what's going to get track and field the TV deals that it deserves. That's what's going to get these athletes the notoriety that they deserve. Because right now, you know this, in Europe, track and field is up there with one of the most popular sports around the world. But in the United States, it's just not. So creating these Grand Slams will create interest from the TV deals. It'll create interest from the fan to know what's going on. And people can sit back and watch those Grand Slams just like they do tennis, just like they do golf on a weekend, just anticipating that they're going to see some great competition.
Let's talk about the golf thing for a minute. The Saudi Arabian investment fund, or the money behind everything that's going on in golf right now, and it's revolutionizing it. In fact, I think one of the prize purses is going to be like 20 million, which is just mind-boggling, right? But newspapers love that stuff, TV loves that stuff, and fans love that stuff. Would you see the Golden Five, the Big Five meets being sponsored by Saudi Arabia, like what they're doing in golf?
Yeah, so that's kind of my point about doing those Grand Slams. Golf and tennis, they make their money, as far as the athlete makes their money, the same way track athletes do. Sponsorship, appearance fees, and prize money. That's how they make their money. So it's not that there needs to be a salary like a team sport. So for track and field to do it, it would still be sponsorships, prize money, and appearance fees to go to different meets outside of the Grand Slams. But if you put together a 4-day tournament-style Grand Slam for track and field, which would be what I described before, it's going to allow each one of those hotspots to pour as much money as they can into the sport. So if you do it in Saudi Arabia, it's not like American money is going to be being poured into Saudi Arabia. It's the American TV deals that will pour money into it. But the local Saudi Arabian companies and all of that, they're the ones that are going to really prop the meet up and invest in the sport. And I think that's what we need. Right now, the Diamond League, I feel like is really successful, and you see the packed stadiums, but it's not a money-generating entity for World Athletics, the IAAF, or for USA Track and Field. So by doing it in these different spots, it's almost like having the Olympics 5 times a year, right? But no prelim, semis, and finals, just 2 races, which I think the athletes can maintain. But now you get all these hotspot areas to pour money into the sport, and now you can create prize money for the winner. Because here's the misconception about track. It's going to be really, really difficult unless it becomes a team sport like college track for everybody to eat. That's not how it works. Golf, the top 5% make most of the money. Everybody else is fighting to get into that top 5%. And I think that's where track has to get. It has to get to where, hey, that prize money for winning the 100 at that Grand Slam is going to be $1 million. I can tell you right now, if that happens, it'll change track and field for the better. Because now the prize money will be higher, the sponsors will be paying bigger deals to the track athletes, and the appearance fees for those top-level athletes to go to some of these smaller meets will only go up. But the track world has to buy into that. It won't be as many people running, but if you get into that top, you can make life-changing money.
Yeah. What do you think of Noah Lyles?
I like Noah Lyles. I think Noah Lyles has the personality to continue to prop up the sport. He's an anime guy, you know, Dragon Ball Z. I'm an anime guy. I love Dragon Ball Z, so I'm a sucker for that. But I think that he has the personality and the story behind him being a high school phenom and being outspoken. I wouldn't say to carry the sport, but he can be one of the faces of the sport. Why? What do you think about him?
Oh, no, I love him. He's one of my favorites. When I do interviews with him, I'm allowed once a year because we talk about everything. And he can go, you know, I'm supposed to get 20 minutes and I get 45, you know,
Right.
We solve world's problems. No, he's a fun one. You know, I was like that with Usain too. I used to goof with Usain all the time. And the thing that I liked about Usain was that he didn't take himself seriously.
Correct.
And in 2011, when he false started in that 100, there were no excuses, man. I'm sitting in Korea watching it. I'm looking at him and he goes, I blew it. He took his singlet, went off. He didn't do any weird stuff. He wanted the rules to be the rules. And it was one of the reasons why people respect him, you know?
Yes.
I think it's a big deal. I want to ask you, I was talking to a producer with the Super Bowl, and he told me, this totally blew my mind, 60 cameras are used when they're doing the Super Bowl, you know, because they get shots from everywhere. And that's, I'm fascinated about football. Jerry Rice used to work out with my sprinters at Foothill College in the 90s, and we got him to puke on the side of the track doing 4 times 400 fly. The guy was an animal. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, he would work out with our group at Foothill College, and the 49ers would come and train there. But I always respected work ethics. And it's fascinating to me to see, you know, you having done basketball, football, and track and field.
Right.
Now, after having competed at all those levels, what is your favorite sport?
Ooh.
Do you have a favorite, or is that hard?
That's a tough one. What I would say is I grew to love football.
Yeah.
When I went to college, I didn't love football. And I tore my ACL, and I saw my teammates struggling throughout the year, and then me obviously not being able to walk and all this stuff and not go to practice. It made me appreciate what I had lost. So I grew to love football in that regard. I would say it's this way. My first love was basketball. My second love was track and field, and my third love was football. But I don't have a favorite one of them. I appreciate all of them. I love all of them. And when I said that statement about track and field being the only real sport, everything else is just a game, I do mean that. I do mean that. Track and field is the ultimate sport. No one is coming to save you when you get in your lane. Someone said this, and I agree with it. Track and field is the punishment for other sports, right? When you get in trouble in football, you got to run, right? You got to go run conditioning or do all these different things. And the track athlete is doing it at the highest level possible. You can't run 100 meters if you're hurt. It just won't happen. You will not be able to compete. You can play football when you're hurt because it's a lower level of intensity, although it has more skill to it with throwing the football, tackling, and doing all those different things. So I love all the sports, and I appreciate them for what they are, which is why I don't ever come out and say, this sport is better than that sport, this sport is better than that sport, which is why I was very strategic with saying everything else is just a game. Track and field is a real sport in the most ultimate way possible. I don't look at that as a downer to other sports. I just think it's the reality.
I want to ask you a question about social media, because I think you're very adept at that. Marcel Jacobs, the Olympic champion, put a piece up on Instagram a couple days ago, translated it from Italian, and what he said was, "Hey, look, I have feelings too, and I love to compete against Fred. Fred and I we get along great. We love rivalries, but you don't need to trash talk us all the time."
Right.
And you brought something up that I thought was interesting. You talk about, as an announcer, you try to be a critical thinker as opposed to a cynical thinker, which I
Correct.
really appreciate. How would you explain to fans that Fred Kerley and Marcel Jacobs can have this rivalry? And I mean, I talked to Fred about it in Doha, and I asked Fred, "What's your secret sauce?" And he goes, "I compete at everything, man." He goes, "I love to," and you can see it in him, right? And I love that kind of stuff, right? But how would you explain to fans a relationship where athletes are going to line up and try to beat the heck out of each other in the sprints, but they can also respect each other?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between athletes liking each other and athletes respecting each other, right?
Okay.
It's really tough for Fred. I know Fred personally. I don't know Marcel personally, but I did see the post that he put up. And my advice to Marcel would simply be, don't worry about what everyone on the outside is saying. It felt like to me he was trying to humanize himself to his fans, and I don't think there's a problem there. But it's almost like you telling someone, "Hey, don't call me this name."
Yeah.
Now they're going to call you that name for the rest of the time.
No, yeah, it's true.
So for Marcel, that would be my advice. Just don't worry about them and just keep, going about the process of sharing what you want to share. He wanted to share it, so no problem. But him and Fred have a rivalry, and I think that Fred respects Marcel because Marcel has beat him at the Olympics. Yeah. But when it comes to stepping on that track, I don't know if there's a guy in track and field right now that has as much of a dog in him as Fred Kerley. Fred Kerley, without a doubt, believes he is the absolute best. He believes that when it gets to, how do I say this, nut cutting time, right? When it gets to the nitty gritty, he believes he has more in here than everybody else. And you can see it on his face. I've seen it throughout his college career and his pro career. The fact that he went from the 400 to the 100 is just unbelievable, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think athletes in a whole, we can respect the grind that it is to perform at the highest level of what we do. And that is where you see the rivalries happen, but they don't become fist fights. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anytime I've seen this year, Fred Kerley, Christian Coleman, Noah Lyles, Oman Yala, when these guys run and they win, they have this burst of energy like, I'm that guy. I'm him, right? Well, they're saying that because they've lost. In track and field, guys lose more races than any other sport, I feel like.
Right.
But they also have that feeling because it was a breakthrough for them. They've been struggling with something that the fan doesn't know about. They've been struggling with something in practice, something at home, and that is their sanctuary to say, I'm that guy. And they're always competing. None of these guys like to lose. They all like to make money. They all want their contracts to stay the same as the way that they are. So I think that part of it is what the fan has to understand. We might seem like we're at odds, but that's all part of the game. It's part of that mental warfare. I've heard Fred talk about it before. He feels like he's won before the race even starts because he's more mentally strong than other guys. And I think that is something that a guy like Marcel Jacobs has to take on for himself. Does he feel like he has the mental fortitude to overcome the injuries and to continue to perform at a high level? Either way, there's many ways to skin a cat. You don't have to do it Fred Kerley's way. I would love to see Marcel get back to who he was in his Olympic year because I think it's the best for the sport.
I'll talk to you about a comment that Michael Johnson made the other day. Michael does a lot of stuff on Twitter and very thoughtful. And again, another athlete that I got to watch all the big races, man. The one that I will never forget, 1999 in Sevilla in the semifinals. He should have broken the world record in the 400. He looked over at coach. He shut it down. I never saw a guy break 44 seconds jogging the last 100. And it was just like, oh my God. And he got off the track and I'm watching him. I'm within, 15 feet. I'm kind of going, the man is not breathing hard. Oh, this is going to be a great final. It was just kind of cool stuff. But Michael was talking about Ryan Crouser, the world record holder in the shot. And he said that if Ryan was in any other country, Ryan would be the total rock star, you know? And the thing I like about Ryan is he sends me Instagram pictures of him catching largemouth bass when it's 34 degrees in Arkansas, and I think he's a total geek, you know? And I put that stuff up, and people, they get it. They love it. How would you explain to fans who don't appreciate the shot put that we've got someone here that's just a genius at their event?
Yeah. To even piggyback off what you said about Michael Johnson, I ran track because of Michael Johnson. I mimicked my whole style running the 400 off of Michael Johnson's backstretch, relaxed running. You know, I did all that because my dad taught me how to do that. So Michael was a huge inspiration for me. And he's been very vocal on social media about a lot of things. And I also saw Trey Hardy chime in about how NBC does show Ryan Crouser like the most of any network whenever he's on. And that is true when I've watched all the track meets. But Ryan Crouser's ability to break the world record almost every time he steps inside that circle is just something I've never seen before. He's pushing the limits of what is capable in the sport in the same way that Karsten Warholm has pushed the limits in the 400 hurdles. All right,
mind-boggling today.
That somebody would run 45 seconds in the 400 hurdles, but Karsten Warholm did it. And then he goes 46:52 in this Oslo Diamond League, and it's like, this is unbelievable. But the fan at home, what I would like to do is I would like to do a quote-unquote combine of your everyday at-home person trying to do some of these things and compete in some of these events that the track athletes do, just so they can see how fast they're running, how strong they are, how explosive they are, how much technique goes into competing in these events. Because I can't even explain to you how impressive Ryan Crouser is. I looked at Ryan Crouser a few years ago and I said, this dude would be an unbelievable left tackle.
Yeah.
Football, because that's what we end up doing. We take these track athletes and we say, well, what other sport could he be unbelievable at? As opposed to really appreciating the beauty of what they do in their selected sport. But Mike's not wrong about Crouser. If he was from the UK or he was from Australia, he'd be the bee's knees over there. He'd break a world record, he'd get a house, right? He wins an Olympic gold medal, he'd probably get a plot of land. But in America, he gets some type of pay stipend for breaking the world record, and you never hear about it on SportsCenter. So for me, the fan at home, I'd like to take them through that because that would be the way to explain it to them. Because what he does inside that circle is just otherworldly. And you can see it on the face of his competitors, too. When they see him throw that bad boy 23 meters, they're like, holy cow. So he is a rock star. I think he's a star in the track community. I just don't understand why he's not a star inside the United States of America.
A couple of weeks ago, I had to do a thing for BBC Radio about Jim Hines, the first man to go under 10, and he had the world record for 15 years. But what people really got off on was that he's the only sub-10 sprinter to play regular NFL football games, 10 of them in 69 and 70. And what did you think of Jim Hines? Any thoughts? Did you have thoughts about Mr. Hines?
Yeah, I think Jim Hines and what he represented for track to football, I hear this all the time. And I think this might have originated from a guy like Jim Hines, not what he said, but just how other sports view track and field. So the statement is, if you're a track guy who plays football and you're successful, they say, oh, you're just a football player who ran track. But if you're a track guy who plays football and you're unsuccessful, they try to point to your toughness and say, you were just a track guy playing football. And I hate that connotation because I was a track guy. When I came out of high school, I was more well-known in track and field than I ever was in football, than I ever was in basketball, as you mentioned about the Gatorade Player of the Year. So people would start telling me that, oh, you were just a football player who ran track. I'm like, no. The mental fortitude, the toughness, the emotional strain that track and field puts on an athlete, that when they line up in that lane and the gun goes off and everyone's watching, to be able to pull through in those moments is not just a physical toll on the athlete. It's the most mental toll you can possibly imagine. So I am a believer that track athletes are tough. Track athletes can be physical because in order to run that 100, like I said before, you cannot have a quad strain or a tight calf muscle and still go out there and compete at the highest of your abilities. I do think there are more track athletes who can be very successful in football. They just have to change their own mindset to say, I don't want to get hit, this, that, and the other. You saw a guy at NCAA's this past year, Cole Beck from Virginia Tech, who ran 9.8. He's the fastest football player in the nation, and he plays wide receiver for Virginia Tech. Now, I don't know how much he plays or what his numbers are at this point, but I promise you the coaches saw that 9.8 and said, we need to get him on the football field and get the ball in his hands because nobody will be able to catch him. So I do think that there is more crossover than people want to admit. Some of the best football players in the NFL were dynamic track stars in high school, and we need to point that out more often. It's not that they couldn't cut it in track and field. It's just that they're using track and field as a bridge sport, and I don't think that that should be to the detriment of track and field. Track is its own monster, its own beast, and guys like Jim Hines prove that.
Robert, I have about 1,000 more questions for you, but I'm going to ask 3. Is that okay? Do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to make you the producer of NBC Sports for a day, but we're going to go back. We're going to time travel to that LA Grand Prix meet. And I was standing right behind the start of the women's 100, and I'm looking forward to Mary Jose, Aaliyah Hobbs, and Sha'Carri Richardson. Yeah. And all 3 aren't there. But what was even more, I'm watching the producer totally losing his mind, telling people, we got a race in 90 seconds. You're going live on TV. And there's 3 lanes open, and all I'm going is, this is global TV. Yeah. Why don't you have people there? Now, am I thinking too much to think that you need to be prepared to have people fill open lanes if something happens in a final? Or how would you?
I don't think you're talking too much. I don't know if that is on the broadcast team. Yeah. As far as NBC, I think that's on the meet coordinator and the meet producer. But yes, those 3 decided not to run. There were individuals who ran in the prelims that you could have filled those lanes with. And I think that is the best thing to do, because now if the lanes are empty, everyone's going to talk about the lanes being empty. If the lanes are filled, you can shift the conversation to who is there as opposed to who isn't there. There are far more enough female and male 100-meter sprinters that deserve to have their story told and can fill those lanes and make the competition very high quality. And I think we have to be steadfast in that to know, hey, we're going to have this person on deck or this person on deck just in case something happens and someone decides not to run the final.
I want to talk with you a minute about the late Tori Bowie. I knew Tori pretty well. Yeah. And when it first came out that she had passed, there was just incredible stuff on the social media. And, you know, I tell people every day, I'm not People magazine, and you got to give it time. And now it's come out with the autopsy. She died in childbirth. Allison Felix just wrote a piece today that she should not die in vain. How would you? What thoughts do you have about that? How should our readers think about, and what's the legacy of Tori? What can we do to help change those things?
Oh man, that is such a deep subject, because I agree with you. When the story first came out about Tori passing away, there's a lot of stuff on social that I don't think me or you or anybody watching this appreciated, that had been put out there about Tori and the possibility of how she lost her life. Now that it comes out that she died from complications of childbirth, eclampsia, it's very sad. 2, it just puts an emphasis on how much minorities, African-American, Black women have complications with childbirth, at an extremely alarming rate in comparison to the majority of the population. So you say that she shouldn't die in vain. I think it's twofold. I think one, of course, it's how she died, and we need to bring attention to that, and we need to bring attention to not just minority women, but all women being able to go get checked on and being taken care of when they're at their most vulnerable. I've got 4 daughters. I'm a girl dad. I've seen my wife have to go through that process a number of times, and it's never something that's one, easy or comfortable for them. So it's our job to make them as comfortable as possible and continue to check on them. And then I think the second fold kind of piggybacks off of that. Tori Bowie went from being on top of the world in track and field and being a champion to not being on top of the world, and honestly probably felt like she had been forgotten. You know, there were stories about her going through training and how she was struggling there and struggling with, you know, finding a roof over her head. And I feel like it's a testament or a testimony for us in the track community and really just the world to not cast people aside just because they can't produce something for you in their particular sport. She was still worthy of being checked on. She was still worthy of having her friends reach out to her. She was still worthy of being treated with the kindness that you show a guy like Usain Bolt because of what he gave to the sport. So when you ask me that question, it takes me there because of everything that came out after she passed away. And I think, say what's up, kiddo.
Hi, how are you?
Say hi.
What's her name?
Her name is Gamea. She is 3 years old. Say hi.
Hi, Gamea.
Say hi. All right.
I'm Larry. Nice to see you.
We're going to go to the pool? Yeah, we're going to go to the pool right after this, okay? So that when you talk about Tori Bowie, it brings up a bunch of emotions, but I agree with Allison that you don't want her to die in vain, but it's not just because of this most recent development. It's really just a testament to how we treat people. You know, for me, it says in football, when my time was done, there might have been some fans out there that were done with me, but my fans weren't done with me. My friends weren't done with me. They helped me get through the tough times. And I think we could have been there better for Tori Bowie. I didn't know Tori personally, so I don't have that grief on me with her passing. But I know there's some people out there that wish they had done more for her, that wish they had checked in on her more. And I think it's a story that we should take. We should spread that story and understand that we need to be there for these athletes when their careers are done, because they're struggling just like everybody else to find their identity.
Robert, thank you. I have one final question for you. As a dad of 4 girls, what do you tell your girls about sports and education?
Yeah, for me, it's positive affirmation for my daughters. And it's not just me. They've got an amazing role model in their mom, my wife, Grete. She's Estonian. I tell people that all the time. I didn't know where Estonia was when I first met her, but I know now. You know, Eastern European, Baltic country that is bordered by Latvia, okay? And for me, having her be their role model, watching her train as a professional track and field athlete, you know, when she was, you know, maybe 4 years ago, to have my daughters see that, to see her work ethic now as a trainer, it goes a long way. But we teach them, you know, they're smart, they're beautiful, they're strong, they can do anything that they put their mind to. And I think that's important. And it's why I thank the women athletes from the NCAA and the presentation that they put on and what they represent before that final on Saturday, because kids out there need to see that. They need to see that you can be the best at what you do and be the best at what you put your mind to and do it in a glorious way, in the biggest way possible. Our daughters don't have to be professional athletes. They don't. They don't have to be the president of the United States. They can be a doctor. They can be a lawyer. They can be an astronaut. They can do podcasts, right? They can do whatever they want, but they have to know that they can do it, have the confidence that they can do it. And that's what we teach our children. We teach them to be confident in what they do, not be afraid to try new things, and always give their best effort. And I'm thankful that a sport like track and field embodies all of those things. So we want them to be as close to the sport as possible.
Well, Robert Griffin III, you've survived socialing the distance. It's really been a privilege. You've got a new fan here. Thank you for your honesty and for your time. It really means a lot.
I appreciate you, Larry. Thank you, man. It's you're doing great things with this podcast. I'm thankful that you invited me on, and hopefully we can continue to change the sport together.
Sounds good. This is Larry Eder with Socialing the Distance. We had Robert Griffin III. Thank you for checking this out. Talk to you guys soon.
Peace out. God bless.
Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder here. Socialing the Distance. This is our epilogue. We just had episode 129, and it featured, oh my God, Robert Griffin III. He is a three-sport athlete: basketball, football, track and field. First love was basketball, then got into track and field, then get into football into the end of his high school career. How did he get into track? This is fun. He wanted to win the all-sport day mile. He had to break 5 minutes for the mile. So he started out as a distance runner. Then he moved to the sprints. Then he moved to the hurdles. He was a Gatorade Athlete of the Year in 2008. He did the 110 hurdles and the 300 hurdles in high school. 300-meter hurdles, excuse me. And then he moved on to Baylor, fine institution, and did the hurdles there. Was fourth in the Olympic trials and in the semi in the Olympic trials. And then he did, I think he was third in the NCAA in the hurdles as well. Played for, I want to get the teams right now because I don't want to get in trouble, Washington Redskins, the Cleveland Browns, and then the Baltimore Ravens. 8 years as a pro football athlete. And in 2021, he signed for ESPN as a football analyst. I have been worshiping on track and field, and the last couple of years, we do a tweet about him during the NCAA time. He explodes. But I got to tell you that this may have been the best of all 129 episodes that we have done. I put together some questions, and we started from there, and we went in places that I had not explored with anybody else before. Robert Griffin III is someone who understands media and communications. He also understands social media. He's a father of 4 daughters. His wife is a former Estonian multi-eventer, under 23 European competitor there. And then I think her sister is the under 23 champion. He gets sports. He loves track and field, loves all sports, but he had some great ideas on how to improve our sport. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. We want track and field to be one of the top 5 sports in the world. And in terms of participation, it is, but in terms of making it fun for the global broadcast, building that story, is it there? It's not. And instead of just criticizing, we need to come up with ideas. What I like about Robert Griffin III, probably the thing I like the most, he is a thoughtful observer. He is a critical observer, but he's not a cynical observer. One of the problems in media is people think they're very hip about being cynical about everything, and cynicism hasn't gotten us anywhere. It's balkanized our political system. It has created a social media where a lot of people say cruel things. And I want to get to a place where we can have thoughtful discussions. That's what we try to do on Socialing the Distance. And Robert Griffin III has probably done it better than just about anybody. I want to thank our production manager, Mike Deering, for helping me with questions and getting so damn excited about this interview. This was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me too. Robert's one of the reasons why I've done interviews for 40 years. I'm going to put him up there, and he's in my top 10 interviews already. And Emil Zatopek, as we know, is numero uno. Noah Lyles is up there too. But a lot of good things that we talked about. I hope you enjoy the clips. I hope you enjoy the full interview, and please pass it around. This is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun for Socialing the Distance, signing off.